You ever do something stupid even when you know better, and then when things go wrong, you get that sick feeling because you know it could have been a whole lot worse? Now that's exactly what happened to me recently when I was checking for spark. Now the good news is it gives me an excuse for a video. So I'm going to be talking about checking for spark on your snowmobile. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what happens when you do it the wrong way. I'm going to show you 2 tools for doing it the right way. So stick around. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video. My name is David Clark, and this is My Old Sled, the channel for people who like to mess around with old snowmobiles. If that's you, take a second, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell icon, you'll get notified when I post a new video. So I did some videos about 5 years ago, and I did actually talk about spark plug testers and checking for spark. In this video, I really want to show you what can go wrong if you're not thinking about what you're doing. Normally, if you're checking for spark, you're trying to diagnose a motor that won't start, right? So for your motor to start, you need to have the right amount of air, the right amount of fuel, and then you need a spark to ignite that fuel-air mixture in the cylinder. After the magneto generates the electricity for the sled, there's a couple of components that go into generating that spark. So there's a CDI, or capacitor discharge ignition box. That's like an ignition module. Then you've got an ignition coil. That's like a transformer that increases the voltage that goes to the spark plug. Then obviously you have spark plug wires and caps that attach to the spark plug, and any of those components can fail. So if you want to know that your spark plug is sparking inside that cylinder, one of the methods that a lot of guys use, I'll call the old school method of checking for spark. And I am not advising anybody to do that, by the way, and I'll get to that in a minute. All right, so the key to the old school method is the way the spark plug works in the first place. So the way the circuit works, you've got one wire that attaches to the spark plug. The other part of that circuit is where the threaded portion of the spark plug screws into your cylinder head, right? Because your motor is grounded. So that's where that spark wants to continue around that circuit, and it jumps between the center and outer electrode. So what a lot of guys will do, and what I have done dozens and dozens of times, is remove the spark plug from the cylinder. You leave it connected to the spark plug wire, and you ground that to your cylinder head. You have to make sure that you've got a good solid ground. You have to be careful about fuel and all those other things. But now you can see that spark occur, and you know whether you have spark. One of my reasons for doing this video is a comment that I got recently. And that comment was, don't check spark that way because it can fry your CDI. Now, I'm not saying it can't, but I am saying I can't think how that would happen. Because if you ground that spark plug against the cylinder head and you're not touching anything else you're not supposed to, that spark plug is doing what it always does. It's grounding against the cylinder head. As I'm going to show you in a minute, though, frying your CDI is the least of your worries. All right, now when I show you what happened to me and why I will no longer use this method, some guys are going to say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I've done this dozens of times and it's not a problem. And other guys are going to watch and say, he's an idiot. He should have never done that. And you know what? I'm fine with that. If my feelings were hurt that easily, I probably wouldn't have a YouTube channel. So I didn't start this channel to show off my immense knowledge of snowmobiles. I started the channel to share the things that I'm learning as I go and to connect with other snowmobilers. Now, you're going to learn just as much from my screw-ups as you do from anything else. Now, I was actually working on this old neglected lawn tractor, which now just sits here and mocks me. So I couldn't get it started. I put fresh gas in it, I put a new spark plug in it, blew the air filter out, and it still wouldn't start. Thought maybe I could smell gas, maybe it's flooding. That's the part you want to remember. I thought I could smell gas. You know where this is going, don't you? So I took the carburetor all apart and I cleaned it and put it all back together. Still wouldn't start. And then, right next to my other sled, I decided I would check for spark. So I did what I have done dozens of times before. I removed the spark plug from the cylinder head, leaving it attached to the spark plug wire. I carefully grounded it against the cylinder head and I turned the key. The second I turned that key, I thought, wait a minute. The spark plug, on the other hand, did not wait. It did exactly what spark plugs are designed to do. It ignited the fuel that had accumulated in and around the engine. So now that the hair has grown back on my hand and the burn has healed, I can show you what happened in the brief time it took me to put that fire out. So I'm going to direct your attention to the rear wall of the shed behind the replacement lawnmower. This hole melted in the rear wall of the shelter. One nicely charred and partially melted air filter. All right, so that was a pretty significant ball of flame, and I wish I had got it on camera, but I didn't. But there's another fellow that did, and he actually gave me permission to use it. So this was another fellow doing exactly the same thing. He was trying to problem solve a boat that wouldn't start. He did the same thing, right? He took the spark plug out, he grounded it. In this case, he grounded it out away from the motor using a screwdriver, and exactly the same thing happened. If you watch the video, you'll see gas spraying out of that cylinder, and that spark plug is sitting in exactly the wrong place. And again, the spark plug does exactly what it's designed to do, and it ignites that fuel, and the result is obvious. All right, now when that happens to you, you feel like a total idiot. But you don't have to be an idiot. You just have to be human, right? Because you're trying to figure out an issue. Your mind is going in 10 different directions. You're trying to think of all the things that might be happening. You're probably getting frustrated after a while, and it only takes a second for things to go really wrong. Now, one thing that I have learned is that those near misses, those things that go bad but could have gone a lot worse, those are absolutely the best things to learn from. But if you really want to make sure that doesn't happen, don't do that at all. So this is a spark tester, and so this is an inline spark tester. This is one type. I've got another one I'll show you in a second. So this one, you plug this end onto the spark plug, this end in the spark plug wire, pull the motor over, and you'll see it light up here if the current is going from the ignition coil to the spark plug. This is the other type of spark tester that I have. So this is similar to the old school way, except you're not taking your spark plugs out. So with this one, you've got a threaded piece here that you can turn and set the gap, the same as the gap on the spark plug in your sled. You plug this end into the spark plug wire, and then you clip that to somewhere on the motor where you've got a solid ground. And then again, you can see it spark here. You know, both of these, they're inexpensive, they're easy to use, and they're small enough, they're easy to carry on the sled with you. I mean, the other option is just to use a third spark plug, right? So leave the spark plugs in the motor, grab another spark plug, either a new one or one that you know works. You can ground that and use that as a tester. The advantage of the testers is they're easier to see. So one lights up and it has no spark, so you don't have to worry about lighting anything on fire. And the other one has a clamp, so you don't need to worry about, you know, that spark plug moving or dropping off the cylinder head, and you can clamp it in a place where you can see it. It's worth pointing out when one of these old sleds catches fire, they quite often burn until there's nothing left. And if you have a look under the hood of an old sled, it's not hard to guess why. There's a lot of flammable material on your sled. So there's plastics. There's a great big fuel tank right here. That's another reason to carefully maintain your sled. Check your fuel lines every year. If they're starting to look yellowed and cracked, you might want to replace them. Now, if you haven't got spark, you've at least isolated your problem to the ignition circuit on the sled. And you can start to look at narrowing it down further. So is it your kill switch or your ignition switch or your tether or any of those other components I mentioned earlier? Now, if you've got a brand new sled, it's going to be that much harder to figure out why you're not getting spark. Those sleds are so computerized, you're probably going to end up taking it into a dealer and getting it plugged into a computer. All right, guys, so now I want to hear from you. Has anything like that ever happened to you? How do you check for spark? If you had a problem where you didn't have spark, did you isolate the problem and what was causing it? Post something in the comments below. Until next time, I'm David Clark. Thanks for taking the time to watch. By the way, after I put the fire out, I did get the tractor started. It was the carburetor. Now it didn't start ignition. There is a ignition coil. That's like a transformer that increases the volume. So checking for spark this way, you're basically leaving a spark plug plugged into the spark plug.